Hey,
Wonderful.
now I can't see you is the unfortunate thing.
It's all right. I can see
Okay.
everyone.
Okay, great.
I can
Yeah.
see the screen, but it's tiny. Can you make it bigger?
All right. So we are talking about reading today. Obviously is a really essential skill for us to work on with our language learners. And it's often a neglected skill, I think, that a lot of our mentors kind of don't spend as much time on maybe as they could or should, and some of our teachers as well. And so we're going to be talking first just about some of the kind of the details, I guess, about reading during your EAL sessions. So you do have your MLLJs that have all of the reading can-do statements for each level. And those are all things that you're looking to develop in your learners. And so specific to reading during your EAL sessions would be first that you should be using a CEFR action-oriented approach. And that just means that you are using those MLLJ can-do statements to guide your reading instruction. So if you're looking at the reading outcomes on the progress chart and it says, for example, maybe that they can understand fiction and nonfiction. So when you do reading lessons, using an action-oriented approach means that you're going into your reading sessions with that can-do statement in mind, and you're trying to develop their reading skills with that specific statement in mind. So doing those specific tasks. And using evidence-based practices that are grounded in EAL-based research is really important. We know that there's lots and lots of talk about the research around reading in general and teaching students and children to read, but we need to make sure that we are approaching our reading instruction with an EAL lens. And that sometimes means that we will do things a little bit differently because we're working with language learners and not first language students. The way that the instruction that they're getting in the classroom would be focused.
Here, here.
So the first point is that effective reading instruction for second language learners needs to always be based in oral language. So all of the approaches that we discussed today have oral language kind of as the basis. And any reading instruction that we do needs to be treated almost oral first. And really what that means is that anytime that you're planning lessons, you really are working, reading, probably writing, but also listening, speaking, interaction, all within that lesson. The oral language is always going to be kind of at the forefront of any lessons that you do. Denise?
Oh, yep.
You also need to be thinking about vocabulary. So this is a consideration that isn't always necessary in the regular classroom because for the most part, the vocabulary of a text is familiar to students, or they have enough of a familiarity with the context and everything else that they can figure out the meaning of vocabulary. But our second language learners do not have the vocabulary necessarily to understand a text. So we need to front load vocabulary, meaning we need to work on some of the vocabulary within a text before we ever read that text. Most of the, not most of necessarily, but a good number of the vocabulary terms that are essential for understanding a text should be previewed before you read or familiar in some way. This connects to vocabulary building, but also can be an addition, is background building. So we know that students who are coming to us from other cultures, other countries, other backgrounds, where they may have learned different things or in different ways, they don't necessarily have the same background knowledge and experiences that the students in the mainstream classroom next to them have. So being aware of what background those learners are bringing to us and figuring out what gaps we might need to fill in their background knowledge is something else that's essential when we're teaching reading. So if we give them a text and the concept is not something that they have the background to understand, then that text is just going to be even more difficult than it would have been if it was a topic that they understood, regardless of the words, regardless of the phonics and the text level and all of it. If the ideas are not familiar, then we're making that more difficult than it needs to be. And what I think is the last thing that we need to be thinking about when we're teaching reading is how can we build metalinguistic knowledge through translanguaging? So this is a big topic that we could do an entire session on separate from reading, but translanguaging is basically leveraging the first language in order to understand and learn in the second language. So all the learning that these kiddos are doing is tied to their home language. They're most likely thinking in that home language and making all of those things happen in their brain. And so we need to leverage that. We need to think about what might be similar from the student's first language to English, what might be very different, and how can we boost their understanding of topics using translanguaging. That can go, that could become a really useful part of background building, for example, showing them a video maybe in their home language to build background before reading on a topic could be something you might do. Denise.
Okay, so before we get into the 4 different reading practices today, I do want to go over some activities that you can do with your students that would help to infuse some reading into and combine it with the oral language. And I don't know if you can see this or not. It's probably blurred, but we're going to send you this document so that you also can refer back to it after we're done this meeting. So one of the activities is called Talking Points. And what that is, for example, let's say you pick a book about camping. You would start, instead of introducing the book itself, introduce a comment like, camping is fun. And then you would then ask for the opinion of the different students that you have. You know, what do you think about camping? To see what they know about camping. So you could group them with a partner, or if you don't have enough kids to do that, you can just talk about it, you know, between you and your student. But then you could also give them some response type examples like, I agree, I disagree, I'm not sure, but then have them explain why they agree or why they would disagree, or maybe why they're not sure. Maybe they have questions about what is camping, what do you do there? Some of them might not know. So it gives you an idea of what their background is on the topic, and then also kind of gives you an idea of what things you might have to then further explain or get into before you would even introduce the book. Another activity is called word sorts. So that is just literally just having some vocabulary words about a book that you're about to read. And you could have the kids sort the words and then ask them, why did you choose to sort them in those different categories? And that gets them talking about the words. And again, they will quickly identify if they don't know what a word is. You may have to explain it. And that's that. Another activity is called novel ideas, and not the novel that you read, but it's means good idea. And you would divide kids into groups, and it's literally uh, it what comes to mind for me is the games categories. So you give them a topic. Again, it could be the topic of the book you're about to read, and they come up with a list of words um, together in their group. And then when they're done their list, they would one group shares their words, and the other groups would scratch off the words that they had the same, and whatever words and then each group does that until they've all shared their list, and then whichever groups do not have the same words get a point for those words. So kids really enjoy doing that. I've done that before with some kids. A three-step interview. So that this is an interesting one too. You could again provide a topic, and together with your students come up with questions that you might have relating to that topic. And then the students would be partnered with another student where they interview each other, asking those questions that they came up with as a whole group. And then they would all come together and then share the information that they derived from those questions. And another, one last activity is called Mind Mirror, and this is a reading response. So after a reading, you would divide the students into groups, and you would create a list of things that they have to find from the reading that they did. For example, they could pick 2 quotes from the text. They could do a symbol about the setting. They could write a statement about the character, what they thought of the character and why. They could do a drawing about the reading, and then the students do a picture walk or a gallery walk, and they would look at each other's sentences and drawings that they've done, and then they can talk to each other about why they picked those things or whatnot. So a lot of different activities centered around oral, the speaking skills, and everything can be done prior to or after having done a reading. Any questions about that? I know I went through it really fast, but once you get this document, you'll see that it's pretty clear.
So before we move on and talk about the reading practices that we were going to explain today, does anyone have any pre-reading activities that they like to use that they want to that they can share with the group? You can use the hand up thing. You can just speak out. That's fine. Rose, you going to say something?
Oh, I'm trying to think. What did I do this week that worked? With reading activity. Oh, we were working on 2 reading passages about weather, the Canadian obsession with weather. And one was on tornadoes, one was on hurricanes. And we started the second session talking about what was different about hurricanes and what was the same. And then the next step will be a writing activity using a Venn diagram. I find comparing things is a good strategy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially if you can connect it to their prior experiences, right?
Yes.
And figure out. That also allows you to figure out what background knowledge they might not have that you expect they do, and that you can build then. Yeah.
And it sprung from a little boy just moved from Jamaica, and the first time he really opened up and talked to me was about a tornado. So I just happened to, I remembered that we had done a passage earlier about tornadoes, and we also watched the Wizard of Oz clip, which that was hilarious. So yeah. It was the only thing. I didn't want to get into real tornadoes because they're scary, but I thought, oh, the Wizard of Oz. So,
yeah.
A lot of good oral discussion.
Yeah.
Sure. Annika has hand up.
One thing I've been able to do, because my groups are a bit bigger, is divide my group into small little groups, like 3 or 4 groups, and give them each a different article or a different story, and I give them a question worksheet to go with it, and then they have to present to the other groups what their
Mhm.
story was about, what the main points were, and what they took from it, what they learned from it.
What age
I love
group?
that too because it gives them like a reason to pay, like to listen to the story or listen to the text, or right, because then they know they have an activity to do following
I've
that.
also done it with like informational videos to practice their listening skills as well.
Mhm.
And then they'll share with the other groups what they
Mhm.
learned because they're all watching different videos.
Yeah.
It works really well, I
Yeah.
find.
Anyone else?
So my favorite pre-reading activity that I used to do was, and it's not anything special, but it was always my go-to because it's just really easy, would just be to kind of look at the themes, whatever the theme was, and then just sit them down and whether they're working in a group or as a full class, just brainstorm all of the vocabulary that they already knew about that topic. So if the topic was, I don't know, communities, what are the places that they already know that they can name? So the hospital, the school, the library, the mall, the whatever. And we would write all those words down. And then what else in the community? What about the people in the community? And they would brainstorm and really just kind of word dump, right? And just kind of explore what are the words that they already know before we get into the actual reading. So it was always just so simple. And so that's the one that I always kind of gravitated towards. There was no prep.
Yeah. Easy peasy.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
So is there any other
Yeah.
hands or?
No.
I can't see. Okay. We're going to keep going with the talk, read, talk, write. And this is a great reading strategy to it incorporates all 4 language domains. So you're not only reading, but you're also going to be speaking. You have a listening, you have a writing activity as well. And well, from what Rose was saying, it sounds like a lot of your reading activities do follow with some kind of writing activity, which is great because it really anchors their knowledge and their learning. So the talk, read, talk, write, some of you are probably already doing this. I know myself, I had never heard it described as this, but it's definitely something that that I did as a teacher. So you would, as we said earlier, it's good to front load the vocabulary, to have discussions about the topic, build the background. You can use visuals, videos. You might bring some objects in if it's something that is, that would help. And it also helps to engage the students. And at that time, you can be sharing some of your thoughts. The kids can be sharing, maybe they are making connections with what you're saying. And you might want to try to predict what you think, or what they might want to predict, what they think is going to happen into the story. Then, of course, you're going to get into reading the story. So you're always mindful of picking some reading materials that is age appropriate, of course, and that it aligns with, the skill that you want to focus on. And
the level of the kids.
the level of the kids. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to also, maybe if you do have an intent, like an activity that you want to do afterwards, I would tell them ahead of time, okay, so I'm going to need you to focus on listening to maybe certain parts, because you'll need that information to do the activity following the reading, or there might be some different aspects of the reading that you will want to accent. And of course, you want to differentiate the reading. So if they can read it independently, that's great. But if you need to partner them, or if you want to read it first and then have them read it with you together, that would also be an appropriate way to address that. So then what you would do after the reading is you're going to talk again together, and you can use different prompts. It might be that you want to go dig deeper into the reading. There may be some things that you may want to ask them their opinion about certain parts of the book or the reading. You may want them to talk together by answering questions, like Annika had mentioned, filling out some questions, and then maybe they want to share together in small groups. And then you can have the whole group come back together as a whole to share what they discussed. And then you can give them a writing task that would align with the topic. It could be reflection. It can be maybe somehow, how they felt. Did they feel a connection, and what was that connection to the reading? It could be something like if you want to assess a certain part of the reading or what they got from the reading, like, can they answer literal questions, for example? Is there, can they infer some things from the reading that of the reading that they wrote? And, at that time, you may want to introduce a graphic organizer, for them to be able to input some of the information that they learned, especially if it's a nonfiction text, maybe write 2 things that you learned from the reading, or, something of your favorite part of the book or something like that. And that's the Talk, Read, Talk, Write in a nutshell. And what's nice about that, like I said, it incorporates all of your different skills. It's not just about reading, but it's also about, having that discussion, and you're learning about the topic and the vocabulary too. Stephanie, you were going to say?
Just going to basically the same as what you just said, keeping in mind that we're teaching language learners, right? And so keeping language development at the center of our reading lessons is essential. And that's what this does, right? We're developing reading skills, but the primary emphasis is on building the language, right? So
while you're reading the book too, I mean, if there's something that you want to focus on, let's say it is letter sounds or letter, something like that. I mean, you can definitely incorporate some of that into the reading too. But yeah.
All right.
Okay, the next one.
So I'm going to talk about language experience approach, which is one of my favorite ways to approach reading and writing with EAL students, especially at like the A1, A2 levels. But I have used it higher levels as well. So language experience approach, it's abbreviated often as LEA. You might see it that way. Again, it integrates all 4 of the language domains. It's anchored in oral language. It has an authentic context to the reading and writing skills, and it requires high levels of interaction. So all of those things that we're looking for. So language experience approach essentially begins with any shared experience that you can have with your students or have had with your students. And that can literally be anything. It could be a fun activity where you are cooking or going for a nature walk or doing an experiment. It could be watching a video or looking at a picture and just talking about something. So you have some sort of a shared experience where everyone in the room has this common event that they are familiar with. And once you have completed that experience, you discuss it. So you discuss the details about that experience and ask open-ended questions to really get the students to observe what happened, why it happened, the details about it, and just talking through what happened to build vocabulary, especially, and build the language. And then students will dictate or recount that experience to the teacher, who will write down everything that the students say. And that text then becomes the reading text. So you read the text that you have written together as a class or group, read it aloud. You read it chorally with the students. You reread it with the students multiple times until they are very, very familiar with everything that's been written. And because they've experienced that experience together, they have that shared experience, you don't have to worry about the comprehension, and you don't have to worry about filling any background knowledge gaps, because you have shared that experience and written the text based on what has happened together. So it just takes a lot of those complications out of the picture. And you can really just focus on reading. Can they read the words? Can they read the sentences? Can they say it the way it should be said? And so you practice reading it. You can highlight specific words, specific phrases, focus on phonics, focus on vocabulary, whatever it is that you want to work on, again, based on those outcomes and can-do statements from your reading in the progress chart. And that's a text that you can come back to time and time again to continue practicing the reading skills, especially for those lower level kids where they need a lot of repetition with familiar texts. And you can extend learning from there using that text for activities such as identifying high frequency words and word patterns, using it to teach phonics, turning it into a classroom book or some sort of a display. And I would just have a collection of shared writing texts that I had created with my groups that would just add up. And it was just things that we could go back to anytime just to practice reading. If they needed a boost on the SH sound, then, well, I'll pull a text out where we wrote with a lot of SHs. And let's look at this text because it's familiar and then remember the experience, right? And so it just makes it accessible to them.
Okay. Any comments or anything anyone wants to share before we go to the next one? Okay, and next we have picture word induction model. We've, for some of you, it's definitely not the first time you're hearing this, but for some, it could be the first time you're hearing this. We refer to it as PWIM. And again, it integrates all 4 language domains: listening, speaking, writing, reading, obviously. It's, again, anchored to oral language, provides an authentic context, and requires interaction between the students and yourself. So what is PWIM? PWIM is essentially the first thing you would do is you select an image that you are then going to have the students label, like you see in this example. And what's nice about that is you are labeling this together with your students. So at first I get them to tell me what they know or what words they might know on the picture. Gives you a good idea of what their vocabulary level is. And then I would introduce some words maybe that they don't know. So I would point to something like this and say, do you know what that one is? And they might not know. So I say, oh, that's a shark. And I would write that down. And you can make these as busy as you want or, less busy. So depending again on your learners' levels and where they're at in their English language learning journey. And the other thing you can add that is not necessarily on this picture is you can, and I do this over a period of time. It can take, up to, a week. It could go beyond a week because you're doing a lot of different things with this picture and the vocabulary words that you have. But you can also add things like descriptive words. So you could have like small bubbles, or you could add, what are these people doing? They are diving. What's the fish doing or the shark doing? He's swimming. So you could add some action words as well. I tended to color code those. So if it was the nouns, I would do in blue, and then the adjectives I might do in red, and then action words might be in blue. It just helps them to separate which is which. And the nice thing about this, where the reading part is incorporated into this, is you can then play around with the words. So you could type up the words and then have them again categorize the words. So you're reviewing the words and having them read the words often. Then they can go and categorize them, and then you can ask them how they're categorizing and what the rule of categorization is. The other thing that's nice to do with this, to introduce, for example, beginning sounds, you could change some of the beginnings of the words, like tube, for example. Oh, what happens if I take the t out and replace it with C? So it becomes the word cube, and that's a new word that you can introduce. If you, I don't know, oh, fish. I don't know if you could change into a D, it becomes dish. I don't know if I see any other ones there, but anyway, it just gives you an idea. Oh, sand, you could change it to an H, it becomes hand. Anyway, it just gives them, it helps them connect the letters to the sounds and then just get to manipulate and play with the words. I review these words often so that they are able to read them. We talk about some letter patterns in the words, things that can maybe help them, like letters has two T's, flippers has two P's, just some different things like that. How the silent E makes the U say its name, so it's the U says you. Just different things like that that you can use, that you can go over as you're reviewing these vocabulary words. And then finally, when we're done doing all of those things, we would talk about what kinds of sentences that we would want to create orally first. And then I would scribe, and then you can do one of two ways. They can go and write sentences themselves, and then you would have them read their sentences, so they're reading. Or you could have the group tell you sentences and you scribe, so they're connecting what they're saying to what you're writing, and then use that as a reading piece. And that is something that you could review a few times so that they can they get exposed to the different vocabulary and the words. And again, they get used to seeing these vocabulary words in the pictures that they labeled, and then how they can use that to help them write, whether it's a story or a paragraph or whatever. And that is PWIM in a nutshell. It's a really good activity that you can differentiate, and it's very low prep. Like, you literally just need a picture and you can do so much with it after you've labeled. And as I was saying, you can do this over a period of a number of days. You wouldn't do all of that in one day. You would just separate the different activities and just keep revisiting so that they get that review often of those words.
Before we go to the next one, I just want to say that PWIM, I already said that language experience approach was my go-to when I had language groups or classes and with me. I would often use the first few stages of PWIM, 1, 2, and 3, before I got into writing my language experience approach text with the kids. So as we were contextualizing and talking about our experience, we would often do that with those first few steps of PWIM. And then I would just kind of be a little bit more developed with the latter part of the language experience approach instead of the smaller sentences. So I think these are two that really work together. And to be quite honest with you, I would say 14 out of 15 days in my classroom, you would see either PWIM or language experience approach at some level. So I taught EAL for a long time, and those two things were really that's what I was doing almost all the time. Any questions? Yeah, Lisa.
I have one. Okay, so I'm new to the tutoring world. And so I have a student who is in 5th grade, but also like at the higher end of, and I can't remember how, like AB, like I don't remember how all the roles, but anyway, higher level. Yeah. And so getting his interest in doing anything is challenging. And so is this method still going to work? Can I still do it if I get a good enough picture?
Yeah.
I think so, yes. Yeah. I've had my most reluctant writers write using this.
Okay.
But I pick things that they are really interested in. So I would maybe ask him, what do you like? Yeah. Something
then he already knows those words.
Yeah.
So super into soccer. So I was thinking about something like that, but he already knows all those words. Mm-hmm. So, but then I then I guess I would get into the writing and maybe more storytelling or so, I don't know.
Yeah. So reading at the B level is a little bit more, we do have some good videos. I think one of the videos that we're going to share those videos, Denise. I don't know if
We
we
can
plan to
we'll
share them
send
or not,
Yeah, we'll send
but we
them.
can definitely share it. Like there's a great video of really using language experience approach, especially to really push the development at the higher levels.
Okay.
And so yeah, there's definitely potential there for doing that. Getting into the more academic kind of side of, did you say soccer? Is that what he likes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So getting more into like the academic sides of soccer, like the rules of soccer maybe, might be something where the language would be more complicated than just like describe the game.
Sure.
Well, yeah.
Right. And
But
so
even the
thinking about,
procedure describing the game could be, you could say, I know nothing about soccer. So,
Right.
what would you write, or what are some of the important rules to write about? Or,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Because I can't tell if the interest, like the lack of interest is just like general preteen, like tween
Yeah.
angst,
Mm.
or is it like not an understanding of what I am asking, or if it's
Mhm.
not interesting. So I have like this cornucopia of like what I don't know what it
Mhm.
is.
Yeah,
Which
and
is
it's probably
fun.
all of those things combined in
Right?
reality.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So okay.
I
Okay.
wonder,
Mhm.
I don't know, I'm just throwing this out there, but I mean, for the writing part, I wonder if he would respond to like speech to text, like if he would be able to tell you all the things, and if he would be engaged in doing something like that first. I don't
Okay.
know. I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Sometimes the act of writing is what they're reluctant to do,
Yeah. For
Yeah.
sure. For sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so the last reading technique we're going to talk about is really several techniques together. It's just shared reading. Language experience approach and picture word inductive model are really shared writing techniques that incorporate a lot of reading and into them. Shared reading, we're going to look at several different ways that you can do shared reading with your groups. So Denise, it does all the same things that the other ones do. All right, so shared reading is an opportunity for them to hear and practice fluent English reading in a highly supported and low risk way. So you can incorporate actually all of these into, for example, your talk, read, talk, write, or language experience approach, just ways of reading and practicing reading fluency, reading pronunciation, all those things. Some forms of shared reading that you can do with students would be echo reading, which is when you would read first and the student repeats. And I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't recommend doing that at the word level, but phrases or sentences, or probably not a full paragraph, but yeah, either a phrase within a sentence or a full sentence where you read and then they read. And you can track as you're doing it. So I would track with my finger as I'm reading and then as they're reading to kind of keep them on track. They're going to read aloud. Choral reading is when everyone reads at the same time. Takes the pressure off a student when they don't think that other people are listening to them, but you can still listen to them. Obviously, this is more so if you have more than one student. If you are just you and one student, then you're choral reading with them, but it just means that everyone's reading at the same time. And so as the teacher or the leader in the group, you're going to be setting the pace. You're going to be reading a little louder than everyone else. But if they stumble over words, they're going to hear how you say it, but they're just going to be able to keep going. So kids respond well to that. I often would get kids to come in after we've done a choral reading where we've choral read a whole paragraph, and then I might say, all right, does anyone want to read aloud this paragraph? And you get some really reluctant readers sometimes who will volunteer because they've already read it out loud once. Readers Theater is a collaborative activity that you can do, basically where you just practice reading aloud a text theatrically. So with lots of emotion, lots of expression, and you get kids to practice it, probably in a group who's going to read what and when and how to say it. And it's just that focus on how to read aloud. And One Text, Four Voices is you type a short text, such as a poem, in different fonts. So 4 different fonts divide students into groups of 4 and assign 1 fonts to each student. So they practice reading the text and then they share their collaborative reading. So it's similar to Reader's Theater, but kind of taking out some of the nuance, I guess, of the Reader's Theater. So 4 ways to focus on the oral production, focus on the oral interaction probably, and some of those different reading skills that maybe some of the other methods don't always hit, such as some of the fluency and pronunciation and things like that.
Questions? Comments? Anything? I'm wondering too, Lisa, I'm thinking back to your question about the reluctant writer. Maybe it's sometimes they're worried about having to write a lot length. So I sometimes talk about, it's not so much about the length, but the quality. So if we can write something that's not too long, but then work on that paragraph or whatever, that, you know, to make it the best that it can be. And again, that can be over a period. So it's not a big chunk all at once. It's just split into, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Rosemary.
Oh, hey, I just want to share. I've always had amazing luck with Reader's Theater, especially with those older students that are at a lower reading level. So it's an excuse to repeat a text and read it with fluency and expression. And last year, we had this really cute little Reader's Theater about noise at night. And they made props and some background things. And we put it on for the kindergarten and grade 2 classes. So it was a chance for them to perform, but not in front of their peers because it was a lower language. And just they had so much fun with it. It was great. So I do love Reader's Theater.
Yeah, for sure. And that repetition piece is so essential for second language learners. And it's one that, again, gets missed a lot because our first language kids don't need that. And if you're always repeating the same thing with your Canadian English born students, repeating, they're going to get really bored and they're not going to like that at all. But it's so essential for our second language learners to have that repetition. So yeah, remembering that. Denise, do you want to just click stop sharing? You're like doubled up here.
Okay. Yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Well, without further ado, I think we will. Oh,
Sorry,
Lisa's got a question.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
But
No, that's good.
it's only because I'm new, and so maybe this is old news for people. But how do you like? I'm new to the whole game, so like I have some readers who I think are just shy. So because they're shy and quiet, it sounds like they don't know as many words as I think they actually do know. So how do I like? And I'm just working in groups of 1 or 2, so I don't have big classrooms. So it's not like just it's so how do I get them to like get that confidence to like speak louder and more like, or is that just time? Like I don't know what to do to encourage that.
I think wait time is something that you can make sure is in place, like almost an uncomfortable amount of wait time when you ask kids to produce language.
Okay.
If you don't feel like a little bit like, oh my God, this is too much silence, then you haven't waited long enough.
Okay.
If that is happening and you are waiting long enough, I'm sure other people have suggestions, but that's just the first thing that comes to mind for me.
Okay.
Suggestions from other people? Heather, your hand's up. I don't know if it's for this topic or not. You're muted though.
You're muted. Yeah.
I had a question about something else.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We'll come back to you in a sec then. Anyone else have any ideas for students that don't seem to want to? Rosemary?
Oh, Lisa, I've been at this game a really long time.
Okay.
So if I think this shared reading is great because the reader's theater, I like that 4-line activity too, where there's that excuse to repeat a text. So the more comfortable they are, the louder, more confident things are going to do. Another little trick I use is the fluency phrases, those common phrases like no way, or even some fun ones like get out of town, that you read in different voices or say in different voices, and you just pick maybe 5 and do it as a little warm up at the beginning of class. It's building confidence. And if you do it in different emotions, like read it like you're scared, read it like you're excited, like you're bored, and it does build confidence. So
Okay.
that might. And I was thinking about your little guy in the soccer. I've had so
Yeah.
many students with their soccer obsession.
I
M-
know. Bless
Maybe,
him.
yeah, exactly. Maybe look at, and I'm going to follow my own advice, try comparing it to another sport like hockey or
Mm.
football. And they all have
Yeah.
teams, they all have rules, they're all chasing after a ball, they all make millions of dollars. So just so he could do a little research with videos too.
Okay.
Or you could
Hmm.
present your favorite and say
Right.
all the reasons why you, and then
Mm.
he has to be like, no way,
Yeah,
because,
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
And
Thank
Great.
you.
we'll talk to you all
Thank you for
soon.
coming.